So this video is about facings, hem facings, and how to attach them. So what I have here in front of me is a men's coat block, and it was made without any hem allowance, and so I have created hem facings. Okay, now usually hem facings are more common on a curved shape hem because you cannot fold it back. So on a garment like this, you could actually just fold up the hem and make your hem allowance, which is the handy way. But there might be some reason you run on fabric or any particular reason, and you might want to actually sew on a facing. In this case, I wasn't planning to do a hem on this. And so I have now created a hem facing. So on the pattern, I just drew up my hem allowance and then traced it off. So this is the front block. Now, just to note that on the pattern these are very abstract rectangles, and they can be all moved around, and so I've got a couple of notches. So one on this, which says side seam SS, and this is just one, so that I have decided that I'm putting a notch on the piece that, the upper part of this pattern piece, so I'll know which way up it goes. Because while I have the pattern in front of me, I can tell by my handwriting that this is the way up. But once I remove that, I could easily mix these up. But now I have the little mark to say that's up, and that's the side. Okay, and the same, this one is from the back. Okay, and it's going to go along the back of this jacket hem. So this is cut to the fold. So when I did the same thing, I have a notch to say which direction is up, and a notch for the side seam. So now I know, okay, this is up, and I don't accidentally put it that way. So it will be going this way. And I'll also be able to now know how to attach these. So the way this is one long hemline on the coat, and I want to make one long facing. And so I have these pieces here for the back, and I know this has the notch, and this is up. So I'm going to find my other one with a notch, and this is, which way is up? There's up. So this goes, now I know this goes on this side, so this is up. This is the right side. And there. So you can see I have fused them already. So you may have noticed on the pattern pieces, it says cut 2 in fabric, 2 in fusing, or 1 to the folded fabric and 1 in fusing. So I have done that already. I cut them out, and I've already stuck the fusing on. So my other side, then I can match this notch, and I can see that's up. So I can place them that way, and I know this is the correct way. They all fit together. So while they may seem easy, these little rectangles, actually without any notches, be very confusing, and you end up having to go back to your pattern again and again. So at the pattern stage, it's best to put notches on for the up and down, and for sideways. And like that, you can see you only need one to show this one side and one to show up. You don't need a notch on all 4 sides, you just need it on 2. Okay, so I can sew this down, and I can sew this down. Now I also did the pattern there, you'd see from the bottom of the sleeve hem. Okay, so this didn't have any hem allowance on it, and this is going to be the facing that will sew to it. So I've already cut that out, fused it, and I've actually sewn them together. So the first thing you do is sew it together in a circle shape, which is what I've done here. So this is now sewn together, and I can look for my notches. There they are. So this is the direction up, and I can place this along the bottom of the jacket or the coat, and if I know that's up, then it's this side that has to sew to the bottom of the coat or jacket. This is a coat block actually, so and I can place it along and pin and sew it all along. So now I have the facing pinned all along at the hem, and if you work away and come right around, say to one side of the front, you can see there is a facing in front of this coat, and you're going to fold that back, and you see that is going to fit just here, and these two will sew together here. Okay, and then this will be designed to sew to lining as well, so the lining will fill in this section, and that's why there was seam allowance on those patterns on the top and the bottom. The bottom had seam allowance to sew to the garment, the coat in this case, and the top has seam allowance to sew to the lining. So first we will stitch all along this, and then we will press it open, do a few snips, and do an understitch to finish it. Okay, so we have the coat here, and I have sewn the hem facing on to the hem of this coat. I haven't pressed it yet or anything, just that's what it looks like when you first sew it, and it will have to be, that seam needs to be pressed open. And no harm to have a few snips. It is going around the body. It wouldn't need a lot, but just so that it's not holding any tension, a few straight snips going this way, and any seam allowances and things can be trimmed down to reduce bulk. And then this corner here, which is the front corner here of the coat, you can see it's hard to get a perfect corner there, so it needs a certain amount of snipping. So to snip straight across and quite close to that seam line, but not right at it. Leave a couple of millimeters. Sometimes you could grade it back. This layer could be a little bit shorter, and this layer. And then I like to kind of fold it back like this and sort of pop it out like that, and that usually does it. A bit of a wiggle, and I'll just spend a little time pushing out just a little bit on that corner. You don't want to push too much, otherwise it goes into a little bubbly thing, so it's pretty good like that. Okay, and that's what it looks like on the inside. It's actually sewn just there, and this bit will sew to the lining. So I'm going to press everything and do a little snipping. So now here is the coat with everything pressed open. Sorry, with the hem facing pressed open, and I'm just, like I said, I'm just going to do a few little snips. No harm to have any kind of seam. Sometimes just create a little tension. I'm putting two of them together. That's one or two. I'm not going too far. Okay, going to, that got a bit caught back. Going to reduce the seam allowances, the bulk on the seam allowance there. So notice actually I've pressed it open, so do press it open before you press it back up. Okay, now with facings it's always likely that a little bit from underneath might peep out, and if for any reason you're using a different fabric or something on the face and you really don't want it to peep out from underneath, sometimes facings go against the body, so sometimes more comfortable fabric like satins or something are used the odd time, so but it looks different to the outside and you don't want it peeping out, so you do what's called an understitch. You can see it all along here. It's already been done for the front of the coat. There's a little stitch line just there. It's about 1 millimeter in, and you just take the garment out flat, pull the seam allowance over to the facing and stitch along 1 millimeter all the way along. So it's a simple enough stitch. It makes it's a very important one. It makes a really nice finish there, so the edge looks nice and the inside doesn't peep out. So that would be really important. So I'm going to do that all along the bottom of this. I'm also going to attach the hem facing for the sleeves. So I've sewn them up already. Remember, that was the pattern. I did do a double notch for the back and a single knot for the front, and this really comes in handy now so that I can see this is the front and this is the back, because you can see how easy it would be to mix up. Also, this side here, the one without the notch, is the one that lines up to the garment. The other one that has the notch is the one that goes up into the garment and sews to the lining. So now I can use these pieces, I can use my notches to distinguish which piece goes where. So this is the front of the sleeve and this is the back. Likewise here, and I need to find matching ones. Which way do they go? And essentially, I need to find a front and a back. So this is the back, and that's a front. So if I go like that, this is a front, and that's a back and a back. The seam is lining up with the sleeve seam, so those two match. And like that, okay, that's the notch. It needs to go on the outside. It doesn't sew to the sleeve. It's the opposite side. And like that, I have the seam here, inseam of the sleeve, and the inseam here of the hem facing. This is a front because it's got a single notch. These will go together and these will go together. So now I have them lined up. It is tricky for sure, and confusing. All the more reason to have those notches and take your time. It's very easy to sew two the wrong way, fuse two on the same side so that you end up with two of the same. So it's really about that methodical approach of cutting out and separating your two pieces, putting your fusing down on them, laying them all out step by step. So you always have two opposites, and then you put the fusing face down on both of them, or whatever way it is, so that you definitely end up with an opposite pair. Okay, so I have that now. This needs to sew to that. So really, and it needs to be right side to right side. The fusing's here on the inside. So I'm going to fold that this way and kind of feed the sleeve into it there. Line up the seams, and then I can line up the rest and pin and stitch away. And so I will pin it, stitch it, press it, snip it, and understitch it. So all of those steps. So you're doing the same steps that you did on the bottom of the coat itself. So on the coat hem, you do the same things on the sleeve hem. So I have the sleeve hem facing here, and I have sewn it on, and I've pressed it open, and now I'm going to do the understitch. So to do that, I'm going to slip this here, the arm of the machine, and what I'm doing with my hands is I'm pulling the seam allowances so that both seam allowances are underneath my line of stitching here. I'm going to put the presser foot down, and I'm going to be sure and stitch just about 1 millimeter away from this seam line. You don't want to be too far in, that will create tension. You don't want to be too close because you might fall off and come out onto the front of the garment. Or if you're really just right on the edge, it doesn't work. It does need to be about just 1 millimeter in. I don't use pins here. I just literally pull the seam allowance over to this side that I'm stitching on. I stitch a little while and then I pull it over, and then I stitch over that, and then I check again and move along. So it looks something like this. I am also slightly pulling the fabrics apart, gently though, just so that it doesn't create a tuck. And so there you have the understitching, just about 1 millimeter away from the seam line, and that's the hem facing, and that's just going to fold up in nicely. Okay, so now that's our hem of the sleeve. All right, so it's an alternative finish for a sleeve. Now this is a straight sleeve, and it could have been possible just to extend it on the pattern and fold it up, which is the usual finish. But sometimes there's a slight curve on the sleeve or a slight angle, and that's really when these hem facings are most often used, right? And that's what it looks like. So it's pretty much the very same as a hem, just has a seam line there. I'm now going to do the understitch on the hem facing of the body of this coat, and there's just one thing to show. It's the very same as the sleeve, where you just pull the seam allowance over, stitch your 1mm. It's just when you come to a corner with the understitching cannot physically get all the way in to the corner of something, just physically not able. You'll see that you can't get in there with your machine. It's impossible to get to the edge. So what you do is you just put it in and you get it as you know, as close as possible, which could be a couple of centimeters away. Alrighty. So, and then I'm going to put my presser foot down. Okay, so it's all bunched up, and that's correct. It looks funny, it's all bunched up in the corner, just so that, you know, behind the foot, just so I can get in as far as I can. And what you do then is you just sew all the way around until you come to the other edge, which will be along here as I sew along here, and you try and just stop the same amount in, so that, you know, professionally the two edges, it's not like one comes to here and one comes to here, that they come roughly to the same, and then that's as good as you can get it. Okay, so this is really just to show you the start of that, and the way it looks a little different, and the way everything's up and slightly in your way for a little bit until you can, until you've kind of cleared that corner a bit, and then it becomes straight for the rest of the run of the hem, which is a long straight line, and just reach under, pull the seam over, and gently pull apart and stitch along. So here it is, the hem completed, sewn around, and you can see what I mean about the two edges, and I'll just show where the stitching started on one side and where it finished is pretty much matched. I think it happens naturally. It's only as far as you can get in at the start is as far as you can get at the end as well, and it tends to be just naturally around the same position. But I did check by eye, kind of, and noted it was about maybe 2 centimeters away from that seam, 1.52 up, and so I tried to kind of keep it to the same on the other side. So here is the coat block, and this is the men's coat block that is sewn up with the hem facings sewn onto it. All right, so you can see that there we have our hem facing sewn, understitched and ready there, and also on the sleeves sewn, understitched and finished there. So the next step for this would be to put a lining in it. Okay, so you can see here we have the hem and the facings, and the lining will be everything inside that, and we'll sew along here along the hem facing. So we need to actually, our next step will be to blind hem this hem facing. So it's going to sew to a lining here. So you need to come back the 1.5. You're going to need to allow that, because we're going to need to get in there and sew it. So we don't want our hem stitching to be right at the 1.5, right, we're going to machine stitch it later. So you want to come down about 2 centimeters and do a blind hem all the way along, and likewise in the sleeves you're going to blind hem all the way around, and then it will be ready for the next step, which is inserting the lining. So that will be done on a different video, where we cut out and sew up the lining and insert it into this coat. So this completes this video about the hem facings